Imagine living in a place where, for months, the ground becomes as hard as stone, where winter is so extreme that even death must wait. There are villages in extremely cold regions where the dead cannot be buried during winter and must wait until summer to receive their final burial. This happens mainly in areas of permafrost, permanently frozen ground. In this video, we will learn the story of a family that was tested by the limits of nature. Ittoqqortoormiit, Greenland. In the far northeast of Greenland, where the vast white expanse stretches to the horizon and the silence of ice dominates the days, there is an isolated village called Ittoqqortoormiit. Few dare to live there. Temperatures plunge far below zero, and winter is not just a season, it is a sentence of absolute freezing that can last for up to 8 months. In this village, where the ground remains hardened like stone for much of the year, there is a strange custom that, to the outside world, may seem haunting. There, no one buries their dead in winter. When someone dies, there is no grave, no final farewell, no last shovelful of earth. Instead, the body is carefully placed in a coffin, which is then kept in a special structure, like a small collective mausoleum, where the polar cold acts as a natural preservative. There is no decomposition. The body remains there intact until the arrival of summer, when it will be buried. The face of the one who has passed can still be seen. The wrinkles, the features, the details, everything remains as if they were merely sleeping. It is a frightening custom for some. The idea of having to live with the physical presence of a deceased loved one for months, perhaps even almost a year, may seem cruel. But for the residents of Ittoqqortoormiit, it is also a blessing. It is extra time, time to accept, time to look, to speak in silence, to give thanks. Access to Ittoqqortoormiit is extremely limited. For much of the year, the sea around the village is completely frozen, preventing the arrival of ships. Only during the short Arctic summer, between July and September, are ships able to reach the harbour. Winter dominates the local calendar. There are months of near total darkness, with the sun disappearing completely during the so-called polar winter. The landscape is covered in ice and snow, and the silence is almost absolute, broken only by the sound of the wind and occasionally by dog sleds. The daily life of a family. In a beautiful house painted yellow to contrast with the white of the ice, a simple family lives. 3 siblings, Karen, Christopher and Ole, and their father, Angut. They had lived together since the death of the matriarch 5 years earlier, when pneumonia, common and often fatal in this hostile environment, took her life. Karen, the eldest, is the soul of the house. She takes care of the food, the cleaning, and her brothers. Christopher, 29 years old, works as a carpenter in one of the village's workshops. His talent is precious, because there, where the wind destroys and the ice consumes, houses require constant maintenance. Ole, the youngest, was still searching for his path. Unemployed, He spent his days helping his father with fishing, an activity that was still the family's main source of livelihood. Angut, at 55 years old, was a man of few words, but with steady hands and a generous heart. A fisherman since his youth, he knew the moods of the frozen sea and the secrets of the currents beneath the ice. Every morning, he faced the biting cold to cast his nets, and even after so many years, he found there a quiet peace that few could understand. A life of challenges. But fate, like winter, arrived without mercy. During a rare medical examination carried out in the nearest city, days away by sled or helicopter, Angut received the sentence, cancer, at an advanced stage. The doctor was clear. There was little to be done. Perhaps 2 months of life, perhaps less. Angut refused treatment. He did not want to spend his final days in distant hospitals, tied to machines. He wanted the ice. He wanted the sea. He wanted his children. He wanted to live the end the same way he had lived his life. In silence, at the rhythm of the wind and the tides. In the weeks that followed, his children began to watch him more closely. Ole went out with him every day, holding his nets, preparing the boat, helping to break the ice. Karen cooked his favourite meals, while Christopher arranged breaks from work to see him. Until one January morning, when the thermometer showed degrees below zero, the siblings woke up and realised their father had not gotten up. The silence was absolute. In the cold room, Angut was lying in his bed, eyes closed, his face peaceful, as if he had simply fallen asleep after another fishing trip. But there was no longer any breath in his chest. They cried. They cried with a restrained sound, as is the custom there. Tears froze on their eyelashes. And then, respecting tradition, they prepared his body. They dressed him in the fisherman's clothes he loved most. They placed him in a simple coffin, made of light-coloured wood. And they carried him to the village's storage structure, a shelter where others were also waiting for the end of winter. There, among the ice and the silence, Angut rested. The coffin could be visited. It was not sealed. The siblings went there often. Karen brought frozen flowers, made of paper. Christopher touched the coffin, sometimes speaking softly. Ole sat beside it and talked about the solitary fishing trips, now without his father. For months he remained there. The serene face, the features that did not change. It was as if he were sleeping, simply waiting for the warmth to return so he could rise. And that time nature provided allowed the absence to settle slowly, like snow gradually covering the ground. Each visit was a ritual, each shared silence a farewell postponed. In a world where death is usually fast, abrupt and sealed, in Itokkotormit it is slow, contemplative. Mourning is lived like winter itself, long, introspective, and paradoxically beautiful. The true farewell. And then, after 4 months, the ice began to give way. The sun grew stronger. The ground began to surrender to the thaw. The time had come. On the day of the burial, the entire village attended. It was a community custom, not only to pay respect, but to witness the end of the cycle. Angut's coffin was carried to the small cemetery on the hill, where the ground had been carefully thawed using bonfires and heavy tools. Karen, Christopher, and Ole stood side by side, hands held, eyes fixed. It was the last time they would see their father. This time, the coffin would be closed. This time, there would be no more silent visits. There would be no more comfort in the preserved face. There would be only memory. When the earth was thrown over the coffin, each handful of soil was an act of acceptance. The end had finally arrived. But there was also peace. There was the certainty that, for months, they had been able to visit, touch, and talk. There was time for love to say goodbye calmly. And so, in a village where the dead are not buried in winter, death is not a rupture. It is a transition, a process that moves at the same pace as the seasons. And that teaches, perhaps, one of the greatest lessons about time, mourning, and the love that remains even after goodbye. Because there, between the ice and the grey sky, the dead are not forgotten. They are simply waiting for summer to rest. And the living learn that farewell does not have to be immediate. It can be gradual, human, and infinitely sweeter.